The onSecurity podcast aims to inform and challenge the viewer on all things cybersecurity. Our sponsor, onShore Security, is a premier provider of full telemetry cybersecurity detection via its Panoptic Cyber Defense Service and managed security solutions.
Welcome. My name is Stel. I'm the CEO of onShore Security, and this is the onShore onSecurity podcast. We got Josh Ecklo, our producer. Say hello, Josh.
Hi, everybody.
And the one and only Mr. Craig Brozefsky. I got a smile on my face when I introduce this man. Craig, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
So full disclosure and part of the story, we go way back, and it's going to be a lot of fun talking about those days. What do you think, Craig?
Ready to roll.
Well, let's frame it. We go back to the 90s. onShore, at a big chunk of the company was our dev shop, probably the biggest chunk of the company. Craig was one of those superstar young kids cranking out code like before the .com era. It was awesome. And it's interestingly, a lot of people don't know this, Craig, about you, but all the network integration work that was going on back then, which was kind of the, where cybersecurity that we're doing today grew out of. Actually, you are part of that origination. The very first, custom firewalls and whatnot we were doing was one of our star coders doing. So tell us about that, Craig. Tell us about that history, how far back we go back, and how those pieces come together.
Yeah, so it was in the previous millennium, in the previous century, and I actually didn't come on as a software developer. I originally worked for Adam, and Adam DiCarlo, and was actually a sysadmin. And I would go and reboot the Solaris x86 box that was hosting. It was a dial-up server with a bunch of modems hanging off of it, and then that led to the work. I think it was at if it's okay to say client names. Ancient and Wind Waldock
they don't exist anymore. They were bought and bought.
So it was down at the CME group, and it was a TIS firewall toolkit install. And if I'm correct, it was on another Solaris x86 box, or maybe it was
no BSD. It was BSD.
It was BSD. Yeah, it was free BSD
on HP hardware.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I spec'd the hardware for it. So but it's just a trip for me to think about how these things dovetail that people don't see today. So let's I wanted that kind of as a good framing, but now tell us, like, what are all the places you went through? So you were the onShore web back then. We were just called onShore Inc. Today we're called onShore Security. And that's whole beginning. But so now tell us your story, catch us up, and we'll take it from there.
So, after that, onShore started doing software development. And so I did that. I remember writing Timesheet, which was internal development for onShore to record hours. Then proceeded to, we ended up getting some work to write software. I believe the first big one was Lockbox, which was in web objects. So this is in the 90s still.
I think they still use it, actually. That was for First National Bank of Chicago, who got bought by the First Bank of Detroit, NBD, right? National Bank of Detroit, and then eventually one other acquisition in the middle, and now it's part of Chase. I actually think they still use the Lockbox online information system we wrote.
Yeah, so that was in web objects, which was really interesting. We picked up, that was a great toolkit, honestly. I remember we did the work on actually old Next machines and on Sun Solaris machines, and that was that was one of my first big software projects, first sizable one that actually had a client that wasn't internal development, and that was a lot of fun. It was after that I was really more, like my tagline says, more build than break. So I had the security background, but I was more about creating things, building things, that's how I ended up building software tools for the security industry. And so, from that Lockbox, then we went on to build, web checkout, which, onshore development split from onshore because of, you know, the differences in running a software business versus running a
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
business, which I continually run into through my entire career, right? Repeatedly. And so, we basically did a resource scheduling and planning system for universities, which that company was an ongoing concern. It was sold a few years back. I used my bit of shares to travel South America for a bit, and yeah, so that was actually done all in Common Lisp. So definitely, I'm a bit of a polyglot programmer. I'm definitely lean towards the Lisp side. So done a lot of work in Common Lisp, and now pretty much all the work I've been doing for the last 10 years has been in Clojure, which is a Lisp variant that runs in the JVM. And so, after onshore, I took a break, and then I got back. I was doing research programming at Northwestern University at the Center for Connected Learning and Computer-Based Modeling. And there, we were really focused on building tools for kids to learn programming as well as science. So they're educational tools. And the tool we were working on was Netlogo, right? So if those are familiar with Logo, one of the original uh, programming education tools, coming from Seymour Papert and his team. And so the lab there was run by Uri Walensky, who is a grad student of Seymour Papert, and I learned a lot from him and the team of postdocs and stuff that worked there. So about how people learn how to write software that is discoverable, and so or learnable, right? And they had I always get it's either constructionist or constructivist learning theory. So the was a core part of their curriculum, and at the core of that is this notion that learning is best done with a critical object that you can test, you can build an internal model of it, make changes, test your hypothesis, and you learn very quickly that way. And then this is even more emphasized if you're trying to learn collectively as a group. And software development really comes down to, unless you're building a team of one, software development really comes down to team education, team collaboration, and the team learning about the problem domain that they're working in. And so doing that with a shared critical object is essential to building shared understanding and getting good momentum, right? And moving fast. So that was one of my takeaways from there. I worked on the Netlogo runtime. It was in Java, and you got to do lots of really fun stuff and work with really cool people. And then I left there to go to Matasano, which was a security boutique, I think they call them. They basically did pen testing in Chicago, and I worked with an old friend of mine, Tom Tachek, who I'd known since I was like 19 when I first moved to Chicago. And I worked on their firewall management software, which never got released because, surprise, a consulting company doesn't really have the same risk profile. They're way more, especially a boutique, is way more risk adverse than a software development company. So I did have a lot of fun there, hacking lots on Ruby on Rails and some really great UI. It was fun to work with Tom and the team there. And Aaron, Eric, and many others. And there I met some people, Wes Brown in particular, who, after I left Montesano, I contacted Wes, and he was working at ThreatGrid, which was a malware analysis sandbox company. And again, I didn't at Montesano. I was working in Ruby, but I was hired because of my Lisp experience because it's useful for it's a useful toolkit to have to learn new domains and write sort of we'll call them domain tools for people who are practitioners in a specific problem space. You hear it called frequently DSLs or domain specific languages. So Lisp is you're naturally oriented towards writing that. But that's an approach you can take to a lot of spaces. So ThreatGrid is building a big sandbox, malware analysis sandbox. I reached out to Wes because we'd always been talking about working together, along with Scott Dunlop, who also was at ThreatGrid, and so I built their kernel monitor, which was a programmable debugger that hooked up to a VM and was able to debug and put hooks and invisibly monitor the Windows kernel running inside the VM. The things inside actually couldn't see any of the breakpoints or anything like that because it was actually in the VM process itself, not in the Windows kernel. And doing that was a lot of fun. And eventually, I started working. That was all done in Python. Started working in Clojure. Basically, built a big malware sandbox analysis thing, and that's super scalar. And the key part was that it's an expert system. So we had really top-notch experts in malware analysis and reverse engineering. And so I built a language in Clojure for them to express their learnings. And so they would write these rules that would identify dynamic behavior of malware, right? And then explain that. And it was two purposes to this. One was, I mean, capturing the expert knowledge is critical, right? Because now we had this system that could analyze random files dynamically as well as statically. Statically meaning looking at the binary. Dynamically means running it and see what it does. In this case, and you could do that at really massive scale, which is why we ended up eventually being bought by Cisco to be hooked into their infrastructure. So all of their infrastructure, when they pull like their IDSs, their endpoints, their email, their web proxies, all of these things, when they have some file that they want analyzed or to learn about, they send it to ThreatGrid. Right? And the other part of this was to teach people how to do malware or reverse engineering, because the common problem in the security world is you don't have skilled labor, right? You don't have people. You never have enough. You never have enough, right? And it takes a long time. It's a very specialized field. It's an adversarial field, so you can't learn just one thing. You can't just learn the current state of it. You have to continually be updating your skills and learning what the other side, the bad guys, so to speak, are doing. And also you have to update to the environment that you're working in, right? It used to be that, okay, well, security was network routing, firewalls, and maybe some Windows things. Now security has to be cloud, network, IDS, email, web proxying, endpoints from mobile to desktops to Lambda servers, or Lambdas in the cloud, to all of that stuff.
Well, I'll make an argument because we've overprivileged applications, but that's a whole other discussion.
I would agree, actually. But as a practitioner and in the world that you find yourself in, the real, the sort of the dirty real world with all of the path dependence, or of a modern small to medium sized business or even enterprise, right? There's a lot you have to know, because those nooks and crannies are where the bad guys hide, right? And so the other part of ThreatGrid, besides detecting malware, was teaching people how to do reverse engineering. So the rules would generate some really descriptive text, and so that's capturing expert knowledge, right? Automating it and then using it as a tool to make decisions, but then also to train up your staff. So after ThreatGrid was purchased by Cisco, and then we integrated ThreatGrid into all the Cisco sort of portfolio, and then moved on to the next phase, which is building a platform to unify their portfolio. And that's where SecureX, which is what I worked on next. So I was the principal engineer for SecureX under Dean DeBeer's leadership. Dean was the founding CTO of ThreatGrid, right? And that was a sort of we'll call it an underground effort to unify their portfolio, that ended up becoming the core of their portfolio. And you can see it now. It's their platform for security. And so that was, again, written in Clojure, and it was all about the domain model for incident response and threat intelligence, and building a fabric for all the different pieces of their portfolio to come together. So after I did that for years, and decided I had my run at Cisco, and I needed a break. It was quite stressful, honestly, and going from a team of 3 to 30 something, and
Yeah.
having sort of run my course there, and
Right.
wanted to change. So I
Well,
became a ski bum. That was my
yeah, that was
yeah
that's your new title. Well,
my yep
well, I really, I love that story because it's not just a story of you, an amazing story of bringing together the network talent, the network kind of centric approach, a really kind of Unix kind of thinking, of a truly multi-user environment, and bringing that up to today where it just should have been a long time ago, like baked kind of into security. But there's still so much fragmentation in the security space. It's starting to come together, but the orchestration part is the most fragmented of all. And so I applaud you for taking that lead at Cisco. And Cisco's generally not been at the forefront on cybersecurity stuff. They've kind of been followers, and that's a real leadership,
yeah
I think, kind of stance. But now you're at onShore,
yeah
and at onShore, thank you, leading up a whole new effort. Working closely with Anil on product development as as one of the whatever lead engineers, architects. Tell us about the work you're doing now at our company, and how you were informed by your past to bring to make this happen.
yeah sure. So all that tool building I was doing for practitioners, right? That's really important to me. And but the thing is, I was working at a very large corporation, and we had great, Cisco had a great we'll call it design partner program, and I had access to customers, right? But I didn't have access to the users so much. I had access to the purchasers and the CSOs and such. And I mean, amazing people, and I learned a lot from them. But the world on the ground, I wanted to get on the ground a little bit more, right, and see what an analyst sees what it means to actually do a deployment, as opposed to write software that you think is fitting, and then have like solutions architects and a whole cadre, hundreds of people, and
Mm-hmm.
all that money to try to make it work, and then someone says, "Oh, I like it," but you don't know if they're actually successful. You don't know if it's actually solving the problem. And I mean, I think we did do a pretty good job, but there's always a gap. And you develop ideas and you want to test those ideas. So I had an abstract framework of how this all worked, and I wanted to see how well it worked in reality. And it turns out that it's partially useful in reality, but reality is a lot dirtier, a lot harder to move in, a lot more fragmented. Visibility is really difficult, right? Because of the heterogeneous nature of the customer network, and I think also the difficulty in doing security operations, right? And just getting the data in one place. And so coming to onShore to work on the Panoptic system was pretty much right up my alley, because I knew here's a place that had the security expertise going back, 20 some years, had a culture of ownership and being proactive and being customer focused. And those are important, right? And then also just had built a system that was really actually impressive for the size of the company, and for the demands, I think the really the broad set of demands that the customers brought in. This is not a cookie cutter system, right? This is custom tooled for each customer based on the sources, the data sources that they have, and the visibility that they need, and the controls that they want, and the capabilities of their team. So it is, that's really impressive, and it requires, it requires a lot of both organizational flexibility, as well as a very proactive team, right, who is flexible and uh, able to solve problems for the customer, right, within the framework they built. It's a little bit different in the software world, right, where I'm like, oh, here's the product, take it or leave it, right, and then so I'm enjoying that, and I think the key here, that the key joy I'm getting out of it is working with that team, and seeing, getting that visibility into what an analyst's life is like, And it really is about making, there's just tremendous amount of signal that they're trying to process, right? And determine, which part of those signals might indicate an actual threat. And then that feeds back into like security operations, vulnerability management, updating systems. But it also feeds back into the sort of the other part of security operations, which is what visibility do they have, and what information do they need to make that decision, right? And yeah, it's a much more heterogeneous set of data, right? Than say when I was working at Cisco, because there's lots of third party integrations there, but it was focused, like I had direct access to the email security team, and I can be like, all right, tell me more about your data model. This is the changes I want you to make, right? Here, it's got to go with what the customer has, and that's the reality of it, right?
And
Um,
almost every single one is like is different.
yeah,
Despite how much Microsoft has dominance on the OS side, there's still a lot of disparity. That's
yeah. I mean, an
crazy.
endpoint is only one part of it, right? And I think the network visibility, the endpoint visibility, the being able to
Yeah,
deal with cloud logs from apps, which actually still are limited. That's if we have
yeah, yeah,
it's so hard to get useful data from them. I'm not talking about like whatever the CloudWatch logs are from AWS, right? But
yeah,
like
yeah.
knowing who accessed what in Dropbox or whatever service, right? I mean,
Right, right.
that's
Yeah,
hard,
yeah.
right?
Accessories.
And
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to do it, but a lot of clients aren't mature to that point to manage their whatever SaaS providers properly.
yeah,
There's good zero trust stuff you could do now, and but it's still not fully embraced even on the enterprise.
yeah. And in the end, it's kind of like I never had to do a PeopleSoft integration or a PeopleSoft deployment, but you always hear like you buy it and then basically you buy like a contractor for 3 years to actually deploy it and put it into your
Yeah,
world,
and
right?
that's more what it's like.
Yeah. I mean,
You know.
that's the reality
Yeah.
of security. Now you can reduce it, right? And you can adjust that.
Sure, sure.
You know, you have this continuum between, ready-made, right, versus, hand rolled or custom built for
Right,
the
right.
software, and how customers are going to have to make decisions about their budget and the time that they have and the expertise that their team has, right? Uh, as far as how much they roll themselves, how much they just say, okay, that's enough visibility, that's enough, you know, which is
Yeah.
often what happens, right? Well,
Right.
we already have outgoing email. We don't have incoming email because we don't, it goes through Exchange, and we don't have a way to we don't have the email services team won't let us have access to that. I mean, I don't
There's
know.
all kinds of yeah, sure. So there's all kinds of like shortcomings, like that. I mean, I'm generally thumb my nose at all these providers that are trying to be full stack, security offering, because there really is never going to be, such a thing. It is just, there's you need to give power to that security engineer and the analyst, and that means don't lock them into a stack. So
Yeah.
it needs.
Well, I think that you end up with in the security industry, right? There's you have the SIM or SEIM or whatever, same SIM, the basically the magical pile of logs, right, that you're supposed to collect, and then the analyst is going to make gold out of the magical pile of logs, right? And nowadays we're also going to have robots and AI, get gold out of the magical pile of logs, and that's pretty much BS in my opinion. But the that model, right? It plays really well for capitalization and sort of a finance model for startups, which is okay. I mean, you look at Splunk and Elastic, and you look at a lot of the quote unquote XDR play that's going on now, and it's like we're going to collect all your stuff, we're going to put it into our system, and we're going to host it for you in the cloud. Well, now your data is in the cloud, and you
What?
might not have, like try getting it out of that later, right? And so you end up with these people that are these this approach to security, which is we'll make it really easy for you to get in, we'll make it hard for you to get out, we'll turn it into an ongoing cost, right? And then we have ongoing revenue. We capture this pool, and this idea that we're going to get hegemony, right? So Splunk is trying to turn their their logging system into this big security infrastructure. But they also do like application monitoring, and Elastic is doing the same, right? And so just the idea that okay, we're going to get all the data in one place and magic's going to happen. That's I don't think that's really the future of security. I think that's an expression of the security industry's um, sort of current phase of development, right? And
Mm.
to me, it's like it's the SIM 2.0 or whatever next gen SIM, whatever the superlative or the modifier you want to put on that. Um, and it's the next try, right? Because they struck out with
Yeah.
the SIM. Because why is everyone replacing them? Well, because you have to spend a ton of time getting it working, and then that's an ongoing cost because your environment changes, and then you find out that well, really, now what I have one big headache with a bunch of alerts and no idea of what's actually happening, and then I have it, we tried this approach, right? Doing it again, but with the cloud and with it, I don't think it's going to work. So I think that I think an approach that is more tailored to, I think you have to be more tailored to the customer environment, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you and not not try to consolidate and not but give them power, but give the customer power, right? And not try to hold them as a hostage, which is I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of a lot of these mega sims or whatever are heading towards.
Yeah, I mean that's just driven by kind of the financial models that have, kind of, kicked the door down not too many years ago, in our, frame subscription, basis. Look back in the day,
Yeah,
that was anathema. I mean, I'm not surprised that subscription model hasn't had the success that it had, but I could tell you if you didn't really, pay close attention and watch it slowly creeping up, you would have said that, you bought software, you bought hardware, you did what you do with it. I mean,
yeah,
you got hardware now that you buy and it stops working after the subscription runs out. I mean, I think it's ridiculous, but hey, they've accepted it. IT departments have accepted it. Corporate budgets have accepted that. So that I think is what you're referring to when you're saying the kind of like today's kind of model that's fueling it. That's what's fueling this kind of shift in the
yeah,
industry for better for worse. I mean, I think some great stuff has come out of it, but I do think we're remiss and we're not no longer thinking of security as a process. People are thinking of it as a product, and we like to say security is a process, not a product. And it's got to be tunable. And the tool is just a tool. So, anyways, I mean, we thought a lot of times about carving out, a product, and I know you had that conflict with Matasano, back when. But at the end of the day, this is the differentiator that onShore has in that we have this utter flexibility. We have never said no to a data source to date. I don't know how many now
yeah,
1,200 some connectors we have. And we built that. And why are we doing that? We're building a tool that's satisfying a very kind of you know, let's say kind of always, custom, unique situation, but empowering the analyst to be able to serve that, giving the analyst tools to do that rather than like, some product that sells well to enterprise, purchasers. But that said, I don't know if there's such a thing as really kind of keeping people like secure because whatever that means. And I don't think of it as a cat and mouse kind of be faster than the guy the bear's going to eat kind of game. I really think of it in the kind of language you use with let's say like the needs of the customer. I'll translate to that kind of like the risks of the customer. Where is their truly exposure? Where is their value? And making sure that they're prepared and we're playing to that. I mean, how many MDR companies develop response playbooks with their customer? I mean, it's just a short list. Let me tell you that for a fact. That's the kind of stuff, that process that our tools need to empower rather than to fight against.
yeah.
Try to
I think
replace it. Yeah.
I think that
Mm.
there's a value in approaching the relationship to the customer not as someone that you're going to sell them
Yeah.
a piece of software, but
Yeah.
you're going to solve, you have to solve their problem. So you focus on that. I mean, that's why all these companies, when they have a product, what do they have? Eventually they get to a big enough size and they have a solutions department, or they have solutions architects, right? Well, that's just telling you that you can't solve the problem with the product. You have to have a solution. The solution, the product is just part of
Yeah.
it. And you have to build that
Yeah.
ongoing services relationship and, consulting and trust relationship with the customer, knowing their environment,
Right.
having
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
having the people there understanding what's going on, where the details matter, right? To deploy the product or the suite, the collection of software, right? That's your security infrastructure.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah. You gave the example of like a PeopleSoft or SAP kind of implementation. You never just buy software. In a way, the software is really just the tool
Yep.
or a toolkit. This is an awesome conversation, and I have so many other topics I want to spin out from this, but we're hitting up on our time. So I want to thank you, Craig. It's a total treat to be working together again, and we've kept in touch
Yeah.
over time with all your open source activities and stuff too. So I love it. And we could shout out to a long list of awesome people that we work together with. Maybe we'll do that another time.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, and Josh, thank you for producing, and
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you, audience. Yep, we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Take care.
So long.